fresh glasses, and 5 million bites of cheese later, we are good to go, right?
Indeed. Yeah.
We're good to continue along this quite
heavy road.
Quite an intense conversation already. Yeah. I was like on the break. How did we go from gun control and the Holocaust all in one first 10 minutes? And we were just talking about red wine from Australia.
Well, this is just how natural conversations flow. You just go where they take you.
It is.
But it's spring, so it feels as if finally. So, the sun has been out for 2 days in a row. The flowers are beginning to bloom. So,
getting some color in the yard just under the leaves. That was like, oh, now I got to move those leaves out of the way. Thanks so much, springtime and Mother Nature. My son that day, he was like, Mom, we really need to get out there and clean up, when it gets a little warmer. And I go, just like everybody else needs to get out there and clean up their yards when it gets a little warmer. We won't be the first ones, and we won't be the last. This is where I like to go middle ground.
And now you have a chainsaw you can use when you're, in case anything...
It would be a bit excessive to use a chainsaw on the burgeoning tulips and daffodils and the hyacinths. I do know that. I mean, I am an aggressive, I'm sorry, an enthusiastic chainsaw user, but I am not a horror film chainsaw user.
No, thankfully. Yes.
Thankfully. Anyway, again, Carol DeVaughan is with us today, and Carol is not only a phenomenal woman and has a wonderful story, but and not only isn't really the right word to have used, but in addition to being a phenomenal woman and having a great story, Carol comes to us from she was recommended as somebody we needed to meet and have on our show because we would enjoy the level and the depths of the conversation. And I can say from our meetings and discussions, we definitely have enjoyed our conversations. But Carol, I would really appreciate it if you would give our listeners just a little tiny bit of your background. And, just from listening to you, they're not going to know these things about you.
Okay. Well, they already know I grew up in Arkansas and went to college in North Carolina.
Exactly. The little Southern accent you have might have given them a little clue that there was some of that going on.
See, I don't hear my Southern accent anymore. I think I've lived so many places. But I went to college as a music major.
Okay.
I have a degree in music with major in voice and choral conducting. So I was singing and so forth. Was married the summer that I graduated from college. And my husband went to graduate school at Vanderbilt. So for 2 years, 2.5 years, I was working. And
were you living together at that point in time, married, and you both were at Vanderbilt?
Correct.
And he was attending?
We both graduated in 1964 and then were married at the end of the summer and moved to Nashville, to Vanderbilt, lived on the campus. And
were you able to perform musically? I mean, Nashville's...
I didn't really... I sang in church choirs usually and did some solo work that way, but I'd never really tried to be a singer professionally. I had planned to teach music in schools, public school music, but that was not a possibility in Nashville at that time because of the way they were organized and so forth.
Because you were a woman, or...
Well... It's interesting because the schools were set up as, first of all, it's very difficult to begin as a high school choral music person. Usually you would start in elementary school and do that for a while, and then you would
up, go through the ranks.
Up, yes.
Okay.
So like a promotion.
Okay.
But Nashville at that time, and I have no idea if they're still that way, but they had what was called a self-contained classroom, which meant that one teacher did it all. So if you were the first grade teacher, you taught your first graders.
Yeah.
And they did have a few music specialists who rotated through the schools and helped the teachers but they didn't pull kids out for special music classes as you might have expected. That was the pattern then. And so I had an interview with the superintendent of schools there, and I had come with really good recommendations and all this stuff. I thought I was God's gift to the music scene. But
the public school music scene.
But he told me that they got all the music teachers they needed from the local college in Nashville. And if by some chance they ran out from that supply source and needed another one, they would certainly want someone who had been to school in Tennessee.
Oh, wow.
And so it was handwriting on the wall, stated pretty bluntly that with a degree from outside Tennessee, I was never going to get a job.
Yeah.
So I ended up working as a copy editor for the book publishing division of the Methodist Publishing House, which was in Nashville. I had never done that, but the woman who was the supervisor said, we don't expect to find people with experience in this field here. So we take people who...
We're only editing books here, people.
But so they take people who are literate and can spell and know punctuation, and they train them to be copy editors. So for 2.5 years, I edited book manuscripts. And it was as interesting as the book you were working on.
So what was maybe one of the more interesting projects that you worked on when you were there?
Not books of sermons by somebody who was important enough in the Methodist Church that they got their sermons published. I worked on a couple of children's books. I worked on a woman who was I'm Presbyterian, and I worked on a manuscript by a woman who had been one of the first Presbyterian women to be ordained, and Georgia Harkness, and so I had contact with the author about the work and so forth. So that was interesting. But anyway, then Bill came.
So that would have been a female minister in the 60s, late 60s. I mean, that would have been pretty groundbreaking.
Presbyterians
at the time,
didn't start
right?
ordaining women to ministry until the 50s in the Northern Church. That was before there was a restoration of the national church. It had been split at the time of the Civil War.
I did not know that.
And so it was finally reunited in 83.
1983.
So it took more than 100 years to get these two groups. So I grew up in the Southern Church, and but anyway.
That's fascinating.
When I went to college, women were not yet being ordained that I knew of. So
when you came across this manuscript as a copy editor, did that get you excited? Or had you already known about this woman?
I had heard of this woman already.
Okay.
But it was a pleasure for sure for me to be able to work with someone in that role.
Of course. So. Yeah.
Yeah.
But actually I didn't actually meet or have personal contact with a Presbyterian woman, clergy woman, until I came to St. Louis in the in 85. We moved back to St. Louis. So anyway, so I was married to an Army officer for more than 20 years.
But then this is kind of interesting because you keep saying, the Presbyterian clergy woman, but you are a clergy woman.
Correct.
A Presbyterian clergy.
When did you become a clergy woman?
I started the seminary in 1989.
Okay.
And I was actually ordained in 1993. So this is the second half of my life.
Oh, Oh, gosh. Okay.
So what drew you to go to seminary? Were you divorced already at this time, or were you still
I
married?
had started I was taking just one course at Eden Seminary,
Oh.
which is in Webster,
Yeah.
just to try it out. During that first semester that I was taking the one course was when my husband decided he didn't want to be married anymore. And so, we weren't.
There you go.
So, okay, I'm going to slow this down a little
Okay,
bit because
I've
this
skipped
is a conversation,
I've gone from
right?
college to
Right. Well,
being divorced,
well,
right?
actually, when you said your husband decided he didn't want to be married anymore, that's when I'm like, bing, 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 like questions. So, did you get this feeling that there was a disconnect between the two of you? Were you sad about him saying, "I don't want to be married anymore"? Was he what led to this? Was this a crazy relationship, or were you like, "Oh my God, I can't believe it"? What happened?
He just died in December of this year. So
Okay.
I kind of think now about what I want to say about that. He was a person who had a lot of emotional challenges. He was a very unhappy person, and I knew that about him. He was disappointed in himself and life and many things. Looking back, I realize he suffered from his time in Vietnam in ways that I didn't recognize at the time.
Yeah.
But I was completely surprised when he said he wanted to
Move
divorce,
on, yeah.
separate, because I knew he was unhappy. I didn't know that he was going to focus that on me.
Sure.
So at the time, it was a total shock to me. Maybe it shouldn't have been. That's my, optimistic
How
self.
old was your family? Were your kids grown at that time?
I had
or were
one
they...
son in college and one in high school.
Okay. Yeah.
And was it a shock for them as well?
I don't know if it was a shock. I think maybe other people who are
Outside.
living in the same house with you, they maybe have a different perspective. I know that they responded to it differently. My older son was more, at least to me, was more matter of fact, and
Yeah.
he was
Well, he was already
already
out of the
away from
house.
home. He was in college.
Yeah.
My younger son was more visibly upset about it. I think
Sure.
it was hard for him, and I get that. It was
Yeah.
hard for all of us. But I made the decision to stay in that seminary class just to focus on something other than the fact that I was going to have to reinvent my life.
A healthy distraction.
Because we had been married for almost 25 years when this happened, which, So I just kept on with the seminary and reinventing myself. And
How long did it take you to chip away at the program?
it's a 3-year program. Normally, it took me 4.5 years because I couldn't. Starting out, I was taking one course at a time, so it took me a while. But that's not.
No, that doesn't. I mean, if you were just one class at a time, that sounds actually very ambitious.
I was able to go full time as I moved on, but.
And was your goal to always have a congregation, to lead a congregation?
I came to that decision that there are many different kinds of ministry. For me, because I enjoy preaching and leading worship, that is one of my favorite parts. And as a woman, because I wanted to preach, so that put me in as a solo pastor in a smaller congregation. Because if you're an associate, even now, if you're an associate pastor in a larger congregation, it's usually the senior pastor who is the preacher.
Okay.
The other pastors get occasional chance.
They do some admin work,
or
the associate pastors,
or focus on Christian education or youth ministry or something.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I really liked being involved in all of it. You know, the whole. I think it's an integrated system, and I enjoyed that.
What was the very first time you gave a sermon? Do you remember that experience?
Mm-hmm.
Was it terrifying? Was it exciting? Like, how did it go? How did you feel?
I was in a preaching class. You know, a lot of people come to seminary and they have already had an occasion to preach. When I was a youth in church, and we did our youth Sunday, I was a girl, and so I did other parts of the service, and one of the boys gave the sermon.
That was just
the way it
done.
was. That was just the way it was.
Okay.
So I came to seminary having I had been in front of people, but usually as a singer or in a choir or choir director or something like that. So I did my first sermon in preaching class, and it was wow.
You came alive.
I love this.
Yeah.
And I got really good feedback from my peers in the group, and the rest is history, so to speak. I still love preaching, and even though I'm retired, I'm still doing it as the opportunities come up.
You serve as
yesterday.
a substitute when other pastors need to go on
It's called
vacation.
pulpit supply, usually.
Pulpit supply, okay.
So I did that yesterday, and I'm doing it this coming Sunday for somebody, and I got a couple more in April. So
Wow.
Marvelous.
Wow.
Well, that's great.
Yeah.
And that helped you redefine what you thought your life was going to be like when your husband said, I don't want to be married anymore. And you were like, oh, okay.
Oh my gosh, what does that mean?
What am I going to do? And so I guess the question is, when that life-changing moment, when your husband delivered his plans for the rest of his life without you, how frightened were you? And that might not be the right word, but like, were you hesitant of how your life was going to be now? And then through the seminary and being a part of that education, did it just sort of open up and clear the way and said, this is actually where I'm supposed to be?
Was there clarity that was brought by
like if you had not been attending that class when this happened?
That's hard for me to imagine from this perspective.
Sure.
Yeah.
I do think, we talk about your call.
Mm-hmm.
And I had worked with a woman, a clergy woman who was in an interim position at the church that I was part of. And I and a dear friend were involved in worship planning there at this church. And so this woman said to me, after we had worked on planning a special series of services, I called my friend and myself the unpaid professional staff, because we functioned that way. We had a very gracious senior pastor who really let us do these kinds of things. And
at no cost.
Yeah. and we were good at it.
Right.
But she said to me, you should go to seminary. I was older than you are when I went, and if I could do it, you can do it too. Well, at the time, I didn't quite see how that was going to happen. But it's a process. for me, it was a process. It was an understanding and allowing myself to see this as a possibility, which I had not really.
I think it's exciting that it was another woman.
Just thinking the same thing. It's a great example of a woman lifting another woman.
You know, and that she saw that you had the qualities, and that you would be served as well as would be of great service to others by going down that path.
Yeah.
I just think that's like amazing and awesome, and
the life-changing gifts that we can give to each other as women by supporting each other. It's just
absolutely
and recognizing that those gifts in each other, you know, and our skills and our talents.
But I think it's also important to recognize that, I mean, one of the differences in my life, because I'm a lot older than you all are, is to see examples. If you see someone who is doing something, another woman who is doing something that you have not really thought of yourself doing, but it's hard to imagine that if you've never seen that, experienced that from another woman. Then it was much more challenging. I think now we have women in various professions, and we have examples.
Well, and then at the same time, because we have women in almost every profession that there is, we become not as, we take it for granted. Oh, of course you could do that. Of course, if you want to be a fighter pilot, you could do that, right?
Of course you want to be an astronaut.
Of course you can do that. If you want to
But
be...
let's get the spacesuits the right size, right?
Right. So, so instead, we don't see that those, I mean, other than being president of the United States.
No, very true.
And, you know, my theory on that is that they would have had to pay Hillary Clinton the exact same wage that they had paid Barack Obama and all the other male presidents, and they just couldn't do that. They we cannot pay her the same amount, so let's elect somebody else.
Will she take a decrease in pay?
Would she take 70% of the fee? Yeah. So that was it.
I don't see that as the main issue. I admit, I've very upset because I so want to see a woman president, and I became very discouraged after that defeat, thinking, as old as I am now, will I actually see this in my lifetime? I'm not sure anymore.
I cried when I voted for her because I was so excited for the opportunity to vote for a woman for president, and I bawled when the outcome was announced. Because it was depressing.
Yeah. I was staying with my grandchildren that week because their parents were on an anniversary trip. And Wednesday morning, my granddaughter, who would have been 11, I guess. I can't remember. I'd have to go back and do the math.
Right.
But she got up on Wednesday morning and she came out and she said, I am feeling really sad today. And I thought, I get it.
Yeah.
I am really sad also.
Just even on a smaller example was when Jean Carnahan was running for re-election. You know, she stepped into her husband's, she won his spot, you know, against Jim Talent when Mel had that the plane crash and it killed her husband, Mel Carnahan. And so Jean had that spot. And then Jean was running for re-election. And I apologize that I didn't remember who it was. It might have been Blunt. Not quite sure. But my daughter was about 6 or 7, almost 8 maybe. And she was just like so excited. She was just Jean Carnahan and, you know, how you are at that age. I was thinking of, you know, how you described your own granddaughter. And when Jean lost, Megan, she openly wept. And, you know, these dreams we have as women, you know, of seeing somebody like that, you know, and there's somebody that we care about and have put our hope into, and to lose because we can't, heaven forbid, you have have a woman senator, or you have a woman president, or and then we flip back to the beginning of this episode, and we talked about the strength of the Prime Minister of New Zealand,
Right.
who is a woman. We look at the strength of Angela Merkel, and oh my God, the complete and utter amazing strength of Theresa May. Even though it is crazy time for her in Brexit, she is still trying to do what she thinks she needs to be doing. And I don't know if David Cameron, he like left, right? He was like, see ya.
Right.
You know? Sometimes the worst.
It's one of those impossible situations where nobody's going to come out looking good.
Right. So let's but the woman still is there doing what they're going to do. And I'm excited. I'm excited that more women we get into Congress, and the more women who run for local offices, and the more women you get on school boards, or, city councils, or, planning and zoning commissions, whatever it is.
Involved at any level of a place of leadership, right? That's what we're talking about here.
Because then you can make the systemic changes that need to be made. And that the things that are important to us. I mean, FMLA came about during Clinton's time because Hillary was
behind him.
Hey,
right?
Hey, this you need to take you need to think about this. You need to think about this. And if we had, 49 female senators and 1 male senator, I can bet you there would be a ban on assault weapons.
Well, someone said to me at some time, since the 2016 election, that she thought that perhaps we wouldn't have a female president until both parties were running females against each other. Until your only choice
was a female.
Oh,
what an interesting perspective.
I don't see that happening.
I was going to say, what's the likelihood of that? Yeah,
but it's an interesting perspective to think that that makes me a little crazy. Also, to think that that's the only way that'll happen. That we don't value a woman as opposed to a man.
Which is kind of crazy when you think about this, all right? I know I'm throwing this out here. You guys,
hold on.
Hold on.
Yeah.
All right? Come with me along this idea, this theory I have. You can go to the movies and you can watch Wonder Woman. You can watch Buffy the Vampire Slayer. You can watch the new Marvel movie that has everybody up, so excited about the female lead. And you can watch all of these sort of science fiction-y superheroes.
It's fantasy, though.
And it's one woman against the world, right? And she's, and she's this superpower. And they're like, oh my God, we love her. They were great. But you take a woman, and she has to have those same qualities in her life to survive in her world, and she's a bitch, and she's
too
hard
sexy
to work with. She's too sexy.
Yeah.
She's too this, and then they try to break her apart, but they will adore.
We can fantasize about her, but we can't, in all reality, be led by her.
Right,
Yeah.
because but as long as she's running around in her wedge high heels,
and little short skirt,
a
and
tiny
bustier,
bustier, right, and perfect makeup and lipstick and hair, and that's okay, especially if she can pull that gun out and eliminate all of the evil people in the world.
But again, that is very clearly
Hunger Games. That was a woman.
Again, though,
lead.
That is fantasy, and everybody knows it's fantasy. They can celebrate that. But if it comes close to any kind of reality, then it's scary.
Right.
Right. And then it's a threat.
And I think part of it is the leadership qualities that people have, and how the things that we admire in a male leader, in a female leader, are not admired.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Assertiveness.
Right.
Take charge.
Right.
Intelligence.
In a male, that is essential. In a female, people are saying, "Well, isn't she pushy? Isn't she uppity? Whatever."
Yeah. Yeah.
And we haven't gotten to the point in our society. I think we're better. It is better because we do have more women taking.
Yeah.
And you can try to figure out where that started. You know, World War II, all the men were gone, and so the women had to do things. Then when the men came back, it's like things can't possibly go back to the way they were, but there was a real attempt to do that. The year that my husband was in Vietnam was a changing year for me because I had a baby. I had to be in charge of everything, and
had to make your decisions. You had to take care of the bills.
And once you've done that for a year, which is a substantial length of time, then you will never be the same person you were at the beginning of that year. You've changed. You've had to adapt and become more independent, and you don't lose that once you've developed those skills, or life skills, really they are.
I think I wish that the male populace out there that was so afraid of a female in charge could just take 1 or 2 steps backwards and realize that with a woman in charge, she is not going to kill you. Right? I mean, how many wars have been started by a female? I can't. I mean, I'm not like, this great history person, but I can't think of any wars that have been started by a female. And any listeners out there, you can feel free to email us and let us know. But it is not in our nature to be destructive and to eliminate. So sometimes I wonder if men are so afraid of a woman being in charge is because they ascribe their own personality traits to her.
Yeah, I mean, so often, as humans, we are projecting when we're making judgments upon others. So that makes a lot of sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. I put it out there, you take a little chill pill. We're not going to eliminate you.
No, we like you.
We like you.
We need you.
We do.
We enjoy you.
We do.
We
do enjoy you.
It would be nice, wouldn't it, if it weren't a competition? If we could somehow recognize, because we need a variety of skills. No one person does everything well, and so you need to be able to balance the skills that fit being president of the United States are going to be different maybe than the skills of running a business, because they aren't really the same. I mean, a lot of they get compared a great deal, but
they're not.
But there are particular gifts and skills that people have, and if they're smart or intelligent, maybe is a better word, they can learn to adapt. They can learn new skills. They can hone the ones they have.
Yeah, I mean, I think isn't it Brave New World that it talks about, that all of the skills are, you've got the ditch diggers to the political, to the leaders, all of us, there is a need for all of us, and we just need to,
well, if we listen and we recognize and we respect the role that everybody contributes to. If you were born a ditch digger, doesn't mean you have to remain a ditch digger. If you don't want to remain a ditch digger, well, let's provide you avenues to bring yourself someplace else if that's your desire.
But it's also okay if you want to be a ditch digger.
But if you want to remain a ditch digger, stay a ditch digger.
Right.
Absolutely. But I feel like so many times we don't show respect because we're afraid. And we're afraid that somebody else is going to take what you have away, and we think of in terms of scarcity versus abundance.
Very true.
And we think that there's only this one size of the pie, instead of the fact that the pie can continue to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And I think we shortchange ourselves as a
Right.
society. And as a globe, we shortchange ourselves. And I just wish I could figure out why those angry voices take a hold, whether we're talking in the United States or the UK or Syria or Iran or the other places, Saudi Arabia. Why the angry and small thinkers? Why they take a hold?
Well, I think when you said fear, I believe is underneath, and the need or desire, I think it's actually a need that some people have for power because that protects themselves from their,
The fear of being eliminated and exterminated.
I also, I don't know, there's a part of me that as I get older, I you know me, Michelle, I am an optimist. I'm the silver lining person, I am.
You're the glitter silver lining person.
I am. But the older that I get, I feel like I am seeing a lack of humanity, like a lack of like real deep, thoughtful humanity all around. And to the point where I'm like, I think we're just less evolved as a species than I would like to really believe. We're still very volatile. Where there are a group of us that are high thinkers.
Well, and I think everything you've said is just valid, but I think you just gave an entire excuse for treating people terribly.
Oh, no.
I don't think it's because they're less evolved. I think maybe there was maybe a naive hope that we were more evolved. But I think bad behavior is bad behavior, and
Totally
we
true.
just don't need to accept it. That's where
I agree that bad behavior is bad behavior, but I just think that there are a lot of the humans that are out there are still closer to. This is going to sound really bad, but I'm just going to say it, closer to animals, to monkeys, or than
to cavemen,
than
the higher learning.
I do feel that way.
How
the
exciting,
fact that they're still so brutal about things.
How exciting would it have been to have been like around during the Renaissance when all of this like higher level thinking was going on,
right?
Or even back, like when Simone de Beauvoir and Jean-Paul Sartre, right? And existentialism. Where's like our philosophy? Where are those thoughts happening today?
They've been back throughout history. There have been thought leaders throughout history.
Where are thought leaders?
And there are people operating today who will, 200 years from now, their names will be known. I think what I keep hoping and working toward is getting people once again committed to the common good.
Yeah.
Because unless we believe, we are very individualistic in our country, and it's gotten so out of whack that we need to just get people back to where I don't matter to the exclusion of everyone else.
I
need other people, and we have to admit that no one does everything well, and no one is more important than everyone else.
Right, get the ego out of the way, right?
I remember...
Get over yourself.
Yeah.
I just want to say.
Yeah, we like to say that here on Clearly Speaking, the podcast. Just get over yourself, okay? All right? However, you said, having a focus in on the common good. And I remember I had another neighbor of mine in the neighborhood, obviously neighborhood. I asked her, this was at least 15 years ago, at least. And she was so passionate about like the school board elections and what was happening in the public schools. And I naively was like, why are you so bothered? What's going on? Because I was genuinely curious. And she very plainly said to me, she said, Michelle, if you are not concerned about the education opportunities for everybody out there, you are going to do yourself a disservice, because when you're in the hospital, you need to know that that orderly needs to know and can understand where he needs to take you and get you to the right place, or the other person and they came from a medical background, if they need to give you so much of whatever medicine that they can actually add and subtract to get you the right kind. And she like laid it out to like, it is in your best interest that we have an educated populace.
Very true. So true.
It is in our best interest to work for the common good.
And that takes back
really
to way at the beginning when we were talking about people accepting the news or not believing facts, not believing science, etc. If you're not educated, none of it makes any sense to you, so you're going to just dismiss it rather than being educated.
And it's and being educated is not a dirty word. It's not a 4-letter word. And
it's not a elite privilege.
It should not be an elite privilege.
Yeah.
And being educated, and in today's world, today's technology, it's right there at your fingertips. Mm-hmm. Yes, you might not have had that chance to have your parents buy your way into USC or Yale or whatever they are, but you still can.
Libraries are free.
Thankfully, libraries are free, and take it upon yourself to seek out knowledge and not just take everything at face value. I think that's the most important part. In today's societies, you cannot take it at face value. You cannot just take it at the headline.
Right.
And then to work for the common good. Because when we, and this is going to sound so cliche, but when we all succeed, right? When like everybody is happy, or even go beyond that cliche, but it's more like when mama is happy, everybody's happy, right? So like if we take care of each other, provide opportunities, provide housing, provide food, however the structure makes it happen, then we are all better off as a society.
When the least is raised, then we're all raised.
Yeah.
We all rise based on the lowest common denominator, and we don't. There are a lot of people who don't accept that or understand that or believe it, whatever word you want.
They dismiss it as not important.
Do you think it's the majority of the people that don't believe it, or do you think it's the minority?
I think
your
it's
sense?
a loud. I think they're loud. They may not be the majority, but they're loud.
The optimist in me
I know.
says that it's a very vocal minority, speaking out of fear, conservative comes from conserving, wanting to preserve, keep things the way they are. That's what it is to conserve. So if you are doing well in an
industry,
life situation that you're doing well to the detriment of someone else, but your self-interest is to keep things the way they are because you're doing well. Yeah. As opposed to maybe offering some sacrifice or some
well, too often they think that I have to maintain what I have at the expense of everybody else, and without really realizing that, by lifting up somebody else, you might even magnify what you have.
And how much is enough is a very valid question. Right. And we have such income inequality in our world today. How much is enough? I mean, if you have $1 billion, that's not enough. You need $50 billion or something. And
Well, I can honestly
I
say
will
that
never
I
get
don't
that.
have that problem of not knowing what's
I know. I
not
wouldn't
enough.
mind the challenge, right?
You want to win the
I
lottery
would
and just
do,
be the
you
one who
know.
proves that you can do it.
I can figure out a way that we all win.
You know, I'd
So-
like the opportunity to screw away with $150 million. I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
At least
You
one
have-
time.
My problem is you have to buy a ticket, and I don't buy
I mean,
tickets.
that's my problem too. I'm always like, well, one day
because
when
it's
I win.
$2.
Yeah, I'm not a gambler.
It's a cup of coffee somewhere.
I
you know.
mean, those $2
A very
over the
local
year.
coffee shop, half a cup of coffee, $2. But
Yeah, but depending on how often you play, that adds up, you know.
does.
Sometimes I'd just rather buy a pair of shoes. So,
well, we're not going to go into your shoe buying
I know.
habits. But anyway,
so we are getting close
We
to our
are.
bottle of wine.
I think it's a good time.
Winding down. And Michelle, I don't think you ever did give your description of this bottle of wine. So I think before we depart here, I think it's time.
well, I have loved this bottle of wine. I mean, I know that you guys are kind of lukewarm on it, so
I like it. I do. But I'm not as, you know.
You're not as
I'm not where
enthusiastic
you
about
are.
it.
Yeah.
I actually think that this is kind of like, well, you kind of said it earlier. It's like, this is like, some grown-up panties. I mean, to me, this wine is like Wonder Woman's panties, that like the strong, along with the wrist things that she has going on, and the bustier, just very, very strong, and
I love that.
now
Wonder Woman panties.
Wonder Woman panties, not necessarily that we would be walking around dressed like that, but if you're
Well, they're
drinking,
panties. They're on underneath. You can have the Wonder Woman panties on any day.
Anytime.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you're thinking about how Wonder Woman stands there strong and, with her hands on her hips and ready to take on the world, that's what you will feel like when you...
Do you notice across the way we have a Wonder Woman t-shirt on?
Eric knew. Eric knew tonight when he was going to help with
Yes.
our podcast.
Yes, we have a new sound engineer joining Sam tonight and sporting a Wonder Woman t-shirt. He had no idea he was going to be a part of this conversation. Welcome, Eric.
immortalized in the podcast world. But yeah, so that's what I want you to think about. When you are drinking this bottle of Phoenix from Penley Estate from Coonawarra,
You will be born
Australia?
a Wonder Woman.
you're going to feel like Wonder Woman.
Yeah.
You are. And Carol, thank you so much for coming on the show
Yeah.
tonight.
Well, it
Thank
was
you
my
for
and
pleasure.
talking
joining
with us.
us.
We
And
have certainly covered the waterfront tonight, haven't we?
we have,
have.
and I can honestly say I don't think we haven't even scratched the surface on all the things that we can talk about. But what we'd like to say here, and we truly believe is we don't drink with our friends just one time. So maybe in the future, if you're willing to come back and
Sure.
we'll continue talking some
Sure,
more.
that would be fun.
Awesome.
You
Wonderful
all are
thing.
not really as scary as some people might think you are.
We're not. We're not. We're definitely we're all for the common good.
Yes,
Absolutely.
exactly. Well,
So-
thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. If you have any comments to share on the show, please give us a call at 812-727-0794. I apologize I said that so fast. I'm just excited I haven't memorized.
And be sure to like all of our socials, and please
Share away.
leave reviews on iTunes and all the places that you listen to us, and share it with your friends, because that is the only way that other people are going to hear about Clitorally Speaking, the podcast. But we really appreciate you, and we will see you next week. Cheers.
Absolutely. Cheers. We love you.